Crowd. This is such an exciting day for me because I am using new software. I am talking to one of my absolute Twitter heroes. I'm going to be learning about something really, really exciting, and it's just a brilliant day, and I'm talking to you from lovely, lovely Macedonia as well. So fantastic time to be on the ITSM Crowd. Our topic today is observability. If you are paying attention to any of the conversations that are happening in the DevOps space, the development space, or you're just following Twitter, you will have heard this term. And I'm going to start by asking our guest to introduce yourself. So, Charity, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. I am on Market Street in San Francisco, tucked into a little nook. So we'll just cross our fingers that I can sit here for half an hour because it's lovely out, and I'm very happy to be here. My name is Charity. I am the co-founder and CTO of Honeycomb, which is a company that is building what I would call the first observability solution for non-Google, Facebook engineers to play with. So we've been doing it for 3.5, almost 4 years now. God, time flies.
Time does fly. And my name's Claire Agutter. I'm going to be the host for today's session. We are using new software for today's episode of the ITSM Crowd. So in the past, we've been asking you, if you've been watching, if you've got any live questions, put them on Twitter. But we've now got the upgraded facility to view YouTube comments live as they happen. So if you're watching this live, if you've got questions that you want to ask Charity, put them in the comments on YouTube. We will pick them up during the episode, and we can get to them straight away. We always start these discussions with definitions. So if I could ask you, first of all, Charity, what's observability? What does it mean?
That's a great question. So the original definition comes from a part of mechanical engineering called control theory. And it basically, observability is a mathematical dual of controllability. If you can understand what's happening inside the system, then you can predict the outcomes. Mm-hmm. So when we use this for software engineering, to me, we're not, as many real engineers will tell you, software is not a real engineering discipline, but there's a real analogy there. If you have the ability to explain any state that your system can get into, mm-hmm. If you can understand it just by looking at it from the outside using your tools without having to ship new code to explain it, mm-hmm. Then I would say that that's observability. And this is both easier and harder than it sounds, right? Because for the past decade or two or three, we've had a monitoring model where, you look at a system, you can basically predict 80% of the ways it's going to fail. You write a bunch of monitoring checks for those ways. And then over the next year or two, you bake it in and you find all the rest, right? Mm-hmm. And pretty rarely are you really stumped. I have no idea what's going on, right? Maybe it's a kernel bug or something. Pretty rare. For the most part, you can predict the problems and you can monitor for them. But in today's systems, once you've started adopting microservices or containers, schedulers, those are actually your daily bread. The unknown unknowns, rather than the known unknowns. And unknown unknowns, if you want to understand them, you have to have been gathering information at the right level of detail from the right perspective all along, that you can explain it without mm-hmm. having to ship new code and guess if it's that. Oh, is it that? Is it that? So from that definition, if you buy that definition, then a bunch of technical prerequisites actually flow from it. You need to have access to the raw requests so that you can ask new questions of them without having to be locked into what you aggregated on or what you indexed on. You need to have it gathered from the perspective of the request itself so that you can correlate outliers, blah, blah. I've written all about this in a lot of places, but basically it just comes down to that. It is known unknowns versus unknown unknowns. And observability is all about the unknown unknowns.
So is this something that you've had to develop in response to kind of the sort of an increased reliance on IT, or is this something that was coming anyway just because of the way that we've matured in what we do?
Yes and yes. For me, it was so my last job before Honeycomb was at a company called Parse, which is a mobile backend as a service, where we provide the entire mobile backend, like Heroku for mobile apps, right? So as a mobile engineer, you just have some APIs, you can create, and we do everything magically in the backend. And because of that, we kind of leaned headfirst into a lot of the trends that everyone else is kind of coming up on, like platformization, like co-tenancy problems. Like when it's like, okay, the problem could be some code that they wrote, some queries that they wrote, something that we wrote, some queries that we uploaded, some combination of the two, or it could be any of the million apps that share hardware with them. It's just like, you should just give up. Like you can't predict these problems, right? And around the time that Parse got acquired by Facebook, that is basically where I was. I'm just like, we have built a system that was basically undebuggable by some of the best engineers in the world. Just almost can't be done. It's a process of like very manual, like ruling everything out. You're SSHing in, running strace and everything, and doesn't scale, by the way. And I tried every piece of software out there. And with logs, you have to know what you're looking for. With metrics, they're gathering the wrong information. It's not aggregated around the request at all. So even if you see a spike in some number here, you can't tell how it's connected to any user, or, high cardinality problem, blah, blah, blah. Nothing worked until I started using this one tool at Facebook called Scuba, which is aggressively hostile to users. It's very ugly, but it does one thing really well, which is it lets you slice and dice on dimensions of arbitrarily high cardinality in near real time. And suddenly, like, our time to answer these questions just dropped like a rock, like from days to minutes, maybe seconds, like, and predictably, like it wasn't even a creative engineering problem. It was like you could predictably just diagnose them this quickly. And that's when I realized we need a completely different approach to these problems. And I do think that complexity is the number one driver of it. It's a sheer number of possible things that can be wrong, possible states that your system get into, right? But there's also, I feel like we're also in the second wave of DevOps, right? The first wave of DevOps is like, ops people, you must learn to write code, that's what you're seeing, fine, but now for a couple of years, I feel like we've been into the second wave, which is like, okay, software engineers, your turn. like everybody has to be an ops person these days. You have to know how to build operable services. You have to have that perspective of how is this going to run? How am I going to know when it breaks? What are the repercussions? What are the upstream, downstream? What is it dependent on? All of this high-level thinking as an ops person is now table stakes for everyone. So I think it's kind of the convergence of both complexity and just the opsification of everyone's role.
And I think I would kind of, based on my experience, I would say perhaps a shift to agile development as well, because I've been involved with a lot of software projects where this observability and this level of understanding would be the thing that you dropped at the end because you'd ran out of time, and we'll just throw it over the wall.
You don't know until you experience it, right? And so you just you predict, but you're not going to predict everything. So then you just drop it over the wall, see what happens, and then you follow along and catch up. And that worked when there was a relatively finite number of states that your system could get into.
Yes.
And now it's like, honestly, I feel like whether it's chaos engineering or agile development, without observability, you don't have a feedback loop, right? You want to be in constant conversation with your code in production with users at any point in time. You need to be able to see what's happening. What are they using? How are they doing it? Because then you can move with confidence, right? Then you're not just throwing shit out there and waiting a week or a month or however long it takes until reports start to trickle back to you. You push it out and you go look at it, right? Is what I expected to happen actually happening? And does anything else look weird? And you catch 80 to 90% of all bugs and problems just by looking at it.
Yes.
If you have the right tools.
And I mean, I love following you on Twitter because I love the conversations you have. And there's a couple of the things that you say that I want to pick up on. But one of the most controversial ideas that comes out is this testing in production. And whenever that gets mentioned, people seem to get twitchy. And
They do.
So talk to me a little bit about that, because it's not as controversial as it sounds, I don't think. But
yeah, it sounds controversial because what people immediately jump to is like the meme, right? The amazing meme, which is the funniest meme ever. It's like, I don't always test, but when I do, I test in production, right? Like, well, that's terrible. You should always test. Always test. We're not saying don't test before prod, only test after prod. We're saying you can do both, right? We're saying you can do your due diligence, right? Your unit test, your integration test, make sure there's no regressions and everything. But also, you can't predict everything that's going to happen. And you need to have the ability to introspect and inspect while it's happening, while it's running, so that you can actually answer these questions. Like there is some, like every single one of us has had this experience where something's happening in prod and we can't reproduce it in dev. Because the two environments are not alike, and they will never be alike no matter how hard we try. Because even if you have exactly the same amount of hardware, running exactly the same amount of CAN traffic, which people spend millions of dollars to get there, and it's usually not worth it. Sometimes it is. Usually not worth it. Even if you achieve parity, you still can't predict Michael Jackson dying. You still can't predict tomorrow's traffic. There's still going to be these unpredictable things. And it turns out that, we're sending all of this energy into pre-prod testing, and there's diminishing returns, right? And so many of us are not sending any energy at all into building guardrails around production, making it so that it's safe for everyone to be in there every day, exploring, seeing the consequences of their code, doing the right thing because it's the fastest thing and the easiest thing and the default thing, instead of like us not investing the energy and there being shortcuts, right, that nobody ever uses except when the site's down. And then you get up fast and use these things. This code pass is never tested, and suddenly they have 5 problems, right? No, all of us who are involved with production should be looking at production every day, getting our instincts from production, getting our feedback loop from production. We should know what normal looks like. So many of us never even look at production unless there's something wrong. And this means that your instincts are going to be garbage. You're not going to have that feel for, oh, this seems weird. I don't know why, but I'm going to investigate because it feels off to me. Like, we need that. That to me is the definition of a senior engineer, someone who has that intuition.
I love that idea, because I think for so many of us, if it's working, the instinct is just to back away and leave it, don't touch it. It's working. Know what?
When you pick up that carpet and you look underneath it, it's not working. It is not working at all. There are so many catastrophic failures going on right now in every production system you just don't know about. In fact, this is an obstacle for people when they buy Honeycomb. We have like a proof of concept process, right? And typically people start rolling it out and they just go, oh, I found a problem. And we're like, yeah, we know. Oh, I found a problem. And we're like, you literally can't stop to fix all these things. They've been broken forever. Please just get through the process and then you can come back and fix all these things because you just couldn't see them before.
So tell me about the Honeycomb journey as well, because we never do adverts on this, but it feels to me, reading about Honeycomb, kind of the journey of Honeycomb has been the journey of observability. So tell me about what it is you do and what makes it unique, because I can't see anybody doing what you do in your space.
Well, this is a good match then, because I'm not good at selling or advertising. All that I can do is tell you about problems and things that I think are solutions. And honestly, like, we started out, we'd had this experience, my co-founder Christine and I, we had this experience at Facebook where Scuba changed our life. It made it possible to administer this platform. And when I was leaving, I've never been one of those kids who's like, I want to start a company someday. I want to be CEO. No. I was going to be an engineering manager at Slack and Strike, and suddenly realized I don't know how to engineer anymore without the stuff that we've built. Like, it's become so core, not to just how I resolve, the site's down, we'll fix it. But it's like every step of deciding what to build, building it, validating along the way. It's like, it's one of my senses. It's like not having my glasses when I'm driving on the freeway. It's just unthinkable once you've had it. So we started building it, but for the first 6 months, like we had to write a storage engine, we had to write a query planner, we had to maintain resources. That wasn't the hard part at all. The hard part was trying to figure out how to talk about it, because we knew that it was different, but every term in data and monitoring, like analytics, like everything has been used to death. Everything's overloaded. There's no unique way to describe anything. And it was so frustrating. Like, I couldn't sleep. And then I came across this term observability, and I'd heard it before, but I looked at the definition, and it was like one of the bolt of lightning. You're just like, that's what we're doing. We're trying to understand the interstates of these incredibly complex distributed systems, through a single lens. And from there, like, everything got a lot easier because we knew how to talk about it. And that's when we started. It all came working back from that experience, right? Working back to that experience. Well, what made it special? Well, what made it observability? What made it different? And connecting those dots has been fun and challenging and rewarding, because we started talking to customers. And in the beginning, like Christine and I thought that this was a platform problem. This was only a problem that platforms had, because platforms all have this characteristic where, you running the platform, it's one system to you, but for every one of your customers, it's their world, right?
Yes.
If you have 5 nines, but your customer's 100% down, they don't give a shit, right? And then if you're a platform, usually they have tens of thousands of customers too. And so they have the same problem too. It's like their system may be fine for each of their customers. And this leads to the high cardinality thing, and for high cardinality, when I say that, I mean, it's a number of unique IDs in a set. So like, if you have a collection of 100 million users, the unique social security number will be the highest cardinality, right? First name, last name are high cardinality. Gender is not. Species is not, I assume. But all of the monitoring tools out there are geared towards low cardinality problems, which made sense in a monolithic world when you had a web tier, an app tier, and a database, right? And you could pretty much guess, and we built up all of these, heuristics and things for getting around it. But it turns out now everything's a high cardinality problem. Like your system is a high cardinality problem. Your containers alone are a high cardinality problem. Like, and the ability to just break down by one user ID and then break down by endpoint. And then it lets you start following the breadcrumbs instead of like having your dashboards and you jump from I have a problem to just flipping through the dashboards looking for which one it matches. Can you imagine in BI if that was what we gave them? We're just like, okay, you're trying to understand users' behavior. Here's some dashboards. Figure out which one it. That's insane. Systems are the same way. Every single scenario is a special snowflake, and you need to be able to start at the top and systematically slice and dice your way, reduce the search base until you find the example. And then you probably want to trace it, right? And once you've traced it and you found it, you want to zoom back out and you want to see who else is impacted by that. And that, like, you asked me about Honeycomb. I'm the worst salesperson ever. You asked me about Honeycomb and I keep describing the problem and solution. But like, we're figuring this all out, right, over the course of the last 3 years. And it's really just for the last year, I think that we finally now we understand it. Now we understand it, we can start speaking to it. And it turns out we started talking to users, and there's so much pent-up rage at all of this tooling. People are so angry because they've been told they're paying tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it used to solve their problems, and it doesn't anymore. Because they used to have low cardinality systems, and now they have high cardinality systems. And with like monitoring metrics, you have to pay additionally for every question you want to answer. You have to decide that up front. You can't, blah, blah, blah. You know all this. I'm just recapping. So we spent the first 2 years honestly just trying to figure out how to talk about this stuff. And then we started realizing everybody has this problem.
Yes.
And we started like trying to key in on, so who really cares enough to pay for it, right? Because there's a big difference between users who are like selling advertisements. They're just spraying and praying. They don't actually care if any individual person sees any individual ad, versus like delivery companies and companies who care about every single outcome. And so starting to pair these to we learned so much from our customers too. Like one thing that I would not have predicted was how build pipelines are a huge part of this. Like one of the first things that our big customers did is they started putting Honeycomb at their build pipeline, because I feel like the software that you use to deploy your software is the most important software that you have. It causes the most problems, and yet most of us don't spend time working on it. We give it to our interns. And we just we route around the broken stairs. But if you actually start analyzing it and seeing, decreasing the amount of time your tests take to run, running tests in parallel, optimizing so it ships faster, you should be able to deploy to your system from the time you merge to everything's live in production in like 4 or 5 minutes for like everyone. And watching people go on that journey has been awesome. So I don't know. From a company perspective, we're about to announce we've raised another round of funding, so we're going to be around for a couple more years. I feel like there are at least 3 sectors of the economy that should not exist. I feel like monitoring and metrics, logs, tracing, and APM were all premature optimizations that we made based on the idea that hardware was expensive.
Yes.
It's not. And in fact, you win so much more from having a single source of truth that everyone goes to, because otherwise, like, tools build silos, right? Your silo starts where your tool ends. And if you have all these teams who have different tools, they spend more time arguing about the nature of reality than actually solving the problem. And so I feel like we're going to see these segments all combined, and we're just going to have an observability category in 2 to 5 years.
Fantastic. So a lot of the audience for this podcast, whatever we call it, they come from a traditional service management world. So we're used to talking about, event management, which is our monitoring and our metrics. We're used to talking about incident management, which is it's broken, how do we fix it? Problem management, so lots of things are broken. What's the single root cause? Which, that's not true anymore. We're not looking for single root cause. So for people who've come from that kind of traditional service management world, what are the key ways that they need to change their thinking? What are the kind of the pointers that you would give to them?
Thank you. That's such a great question. I can go off ranting and so long, so I really appreciate you reminding me who the audience is. So we were talking earlier about how the opsification of everyone's role, right? And I feel like it's important for us to make clear to people, like ops has a well-deserved reputation for masochism, right?
Yes.
For self-abuse. And that is not what we're trying to do, right? What we're saying is nobody has to abuse themselves, because I believe that in order to build good systems, you can only do it with well-rested people who are able to use their creative brains. If you have people who are using their lizard brains because they're so stressed all the time, you're not going to be able to build these amazing systems. So it really starts with the people. It starts with, collaborating, putting everyone on call. Devs should be on call because they're the ones who know their systems. Ops are more like, force amplifiers and experts in helping you make your systems reliable. And we should not feel any fear of being replaced, because trust me, systems are always going to be broken. This is always going to be expertise that is valued. And so we shouldn't come at this from a place of fear. We should come at this from a perspective of opportunity. All of our lives should be much better from now on, right? And furthermore, I feel like the main muscle that we in ops need to start flexing is instead of jumping to solutions, we need to start learning to. There's no such thing as an up or down system.
Yes.
The world is not a black or white. It is always some shade of gray. It is always some flavor of broken. And embracing that means embracing the fact that we deal with error budgets, right? We have an SLA, we have an SLO, we identify that we got all stakeholders to buy into this idea that this is our level of service, and then we all contribute to serve that level of service. So we don't have to get down in the weeds. We don't have to argue about whether we ship features or we do reliability, because we just look at our error budget. Is it up or is it down? Okay, if we're below budget, then we all need to be hands on deck, making our systems more reliable. But embracing this view of reliability that's more gray means, instead of striving for perfection, we're aiming for as many things should be able to break as possible before the user ever has to notice, right? And that is a much friendlier, it's a much more achievable, it's a better way of living than chasing after every error, trying to kill ourselves, stamping out every fire, because that just doesn't work. Embrace the chaos, manage the chaos, recognize that service owners should be service owners from end to end, from original intent to users using it, and then we support them as best they can, and learn those lessons ourselves.
So you're mentioning error budgets, SLAs. We had Jason Hand on quite recently talking about site reliability engineering, which is something that speaks to me enormously. Is that something that's kind of helping to maybe sell the observability concept a little bit more?
Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of converging trends here. 3 years ago, when we started working on this, it was considered controversial whenever I said that software engineers should be on call. I feel like it's not controversial anymore. It's like that's over. It's just how, right? It's now we're in the 10-year journey of how do we make this the right world, right? But it all comes back from the perspective of the user, right? We can't deliver the systems that will make our users happy unless we do XYZ things. And DevOps is contributing to that. SRE is contributing to that. Software engineers, like all engineers, love to see the impact of what they've done, right? Like it's a very healthy urge that they have to get their hands abroad and play with it. All of these are coming from the right place as long as we align it with our users and their needs. And I feel like every single one of us has a role to play.
Now, one of the areas I've done quite a lot of work in is multi-supplier environments. So these systems that are complex, but then the complexity grows because of the number of different, vendors, platforms that are involved. Does that increase the complexity of observability? Does it kind of test the boundaries?
No, it's just another dimension, honestly, because like following breadcrumbs, to solve a problem, it's just a question of breaking down by this, or some fancy computer math to do the same thing. Honestly, to observability, the supplier, the provider, the region, the whatever, it's just another variable to break down by. It doesn't actually matter. It makes it more necessary that you have observability rather than monitoring. But it's this is a thing that I feel like people don't fully understand. People think it's going to be harder. It's easier. It is so much easier. The way you are doing things now is the hard way. With all these hacks and these things that were never designed for this, that you're repurposed because you know it, and it's spaghetti monsters. The observability is the clean, simple, straightforward way to just ask the question that you wanted to ask in the first place.
So what's the future? What does the next 12 months look like for you, for Honeycomb, for observability?
Yeah. Well, we've been in classic startup land where we're, half-assing a lot of things, throwing things at the wall, seeing what sticks, whatever. Now that we know that we're here to stay, it's time for us to really invest in the thing that's been nearest and dearest to my heart from the beginning, which is making it so that it's not a tool built for engineers, but it's actually like a consumer quality tool that is pleasant and friendly, and you take joy in seeing every day and spending a lot of your day in, and building it so that it's human centered and team centered, not tool centered and system centered. And query builders are hard, and building a query is hard. But if anyone in your org has ever had to ask this question before, it should be fast and easy for you to just find it and retrieve it and rerun it, right? You should be able to lean on the wisdom of your team, of everyone who was on call before you, of everything that you've done in the past. You should be able to collaborate with your past and future self. You should be able to collaborate with other teams. You should be able to, go, like if I'm on call and I get paged about something, it looks like a big SQL problem, but I'm not my SQL expert. But I know that Ben is really good at it, and I feel like he had a problem like this last time he was on call. I just want to go look at what he did, right? And what he attached to a postmortem, what he pushed to Slack, what he thought was meaningful, so I can follow his tracks so that I can, take, because I'm very bad at graphical stuff. I'm really, really deficit when it comes to these tools. So I need to lean on people. But making it so that it just feels like your outsourced brain, like the extension of your team. So anyone can go on vacation and we still have all their knowledge and their expertise here available to us. And then making it so that, tracing and events are two sides of the same coin. You're not jumping back and forth between tools, trying to use a human to bridge the gap. That's insanity. There's no reason for that, right? Just making this feel polished and elegant and beautiful, and then ultimately, a year from now, I think we start turning around and helping engineers serve production insights to all of the adjacent teams, like support and product management, and all of these people whose jobs, doing their jobs well, depends deeply on that wisdom that you get from production. They've never really had access to it. Serving it up to them so that, by the time it reaches an engineering team, it's already been triaged, it's been debugged, it's been, and all of us can just get better at doing what we do best.
Fantastic. Sounds like the absolute dream. We're coming to the end of our time. That's absolutely flown. Where do people go and read more? Is there anywhere you kind of point them to specifically?
Yeah, we've been investing a lot in our blog.honeycomb.io, for the past 3.5 years. Most of the best writing that you'll find in observability, other than Cindy's articles, are on our blog or our white papers. We have a lot of white papers for people who are getting started and who want a deeper dive. Also, my personal blog is cheerview.wtf.
Love it.
Too. And twitter.com, honeycomb.io, or Mipsy Gypsy.
Fantastic. We'll add those links into the blog on ITSM Zone as well. So we'll share that after the episode. Absolutely flown, but so helpful for me. Charity, really, really appreciate you giving us your time. That's been
Thanks so much
absolutely
for having me.
fantastic.
I hope the background noise wasn't terrible.
Our next episode is September 18th. We've got Alan Nance and Lisa Schwartz from Citrus Collab. You can see that on the banner there. They're going to be talking about experience level agreements. We will have the blog live on ITSM Zone tomorrow. Thank you again, Charity. Really, really appreciate your time. And that's
Thanks
been
for
a
having
brilliant
me.
episode. Thank you.
Experience level objectives. That sounds